The first award tonight is the NVLSP Lifetime Achievement Award. Bart Stichman will announce the honoree. Bart, come on up.
Thank you.
It is my honor to present NVLSP's first Lifetime Achievement Award to a true pioneer in transforming the legal rights of veterans, David Addlestone. David's pioneering began after he finished serving in the Judge Advocate General in the as a Judge Advocate General in the Air Force in the 1960s. In 1970, he, his wife Irene, and his infant son Benjamin all went to Vietnam, where David served as a civilian lawyer in that war zone, defending soldiers, Marines, airmen against whom courts-martials or administrative discharge proceedings were brought. In 1972, upon returning to the States, David took up the cause of the 600,000 Vietnam veterans who had been issued less than honorable discharges, a stigma that sentenced them to a lifetime of underemployment and often deprived them of VA benefits and medical care. David led a nationwide effort to train attorneys to represent these veterans on applications to obtain an upgrade from military discharge boards. He became the preeminent authority in this area of law, co-authoring the nation's only treatise in military discharge upgrading. David pioneered by writing self-help materials, The Rights of Veterans and the Vietnam Veteran Survival Guide, and by litigating. He represented Technical Sergeant Leonard Matlovich in a 1975 federal court challenge to the Air Force policy to discharge airmen on the ground that they were homosexual. After Matlovich appeared on the cover of Time magazine, the Air Force acted to shield its policy from judicial scrutiny by offering Matlovich a huge sum of money to settle the case. Then, in 1980, David founded NVLSP. Soon thereafter, he partnered with another new organization, Vietnam Veterans of America, to tackle another major injustice: the long-standing statutes that barred veterans from paying a lawyer more than $10 to represent them on a VA benefits claim, and that barred these same veterans from appealing a VA denial of benefits to a court. Getting Congress to repeal these anachronistic laws proved to be a 10-year David against Goliath battle, if you'll pardon the pun, because major veteran service organizations lobbied hard against repeal. Finally, in 1988, Congress created a new court, the Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims, to hear appeals from veterans who had been denied VA benefits. When 80% of the veterans who appealed to the new court could not find a lawyer to represent them, David was able to partner with the American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, and Paralyzed Veterans of America to obtain a federal grant to operate a pro bono program in which NVLSP recruited and trained thousands of private attorneys to represent veterans before the court, a program now in its 23rd year. You need to understand that during all this time, David also served as a one-man development staff, raising money year in and year out from veteran service organizations and private foundations, convincing the Legal Services Corporation to fund NVLSP as a national legal support center in veterans law, and persuading District Judge Jack Weinstein to make NVLSP the largest grantee using funds from the Agent Orange class action settlement between Vietnam veterans and the chemical company manufacturers of that toxic herbicide. That multi-year grant ended up funding NVLSP's successful class action, challenging the VA's Agent Orange compensation rules, which resulted in billions of dollars and retroactive benefits for Vietnam veterans and their families. Time does not permit me to cover all of David's accomplishments, but I would be remiss if I did not mention one other great talent possessed by this pioneer in veterans law: the ability to attract and hire other highly effective attorneys, as evidenced by David's decision to hire me in 1975 and Ron Abrams in 1989. I couldn't resist. To this unique pioneer in veterans law, we present NVLSP's first Lifetime Achievement Award. Ron, will you help me? Mr. Addlestone?
I don't know who that guy with the red hair was. Bart's a nice man. He gave me credit for a lot of things that he did, and I appreciate that. But the Agent Orange case was all his, and Sidney and Austin's. I'm a bit rusty, so I got to use notes. But I'm use the old-time clock to clock myself. Sometime after you're age 35, you wake up one morning and you're in the fourth quarter, and that's where I am. So this occasion made me think back over almost 50 years of practice of law, and I had some extraordinary clients. Bart mentioned one of them at least. And I suppose someone getting an award like this is expected to pass something on that he's learned. And I've got a room full of lawyers here that I'm sure are much better than I am. But Bart stole my line. Bart and I got married in 1975. And we adopted Ron in 1989. And
I grew.
Ron was a pariah when he worked at the VA. He did bad things like testify how the system actually worked, and he refused to commit perjury. For that, he got placed in a closet to an office with a swastika on the desk, and then transferred to Interpol, where he sat in the desk and did nothing. Both of these extraordinary lawyers prove my first premise: hire competent people, keep them close to you. I mean, that's fairly obvious, but Bart is a formidable litigator. I can only remember 2 cases he lost, and those were long shots. That's in 40 years. And Ron knows more about how the VA actually works than anybody else in the world. He stayed way ahead of them. Now, I was thinking about something else to pass on, but what I'd like to do is suggest a dialogue about a topic that is probably not going to come about, but I think it's worth talking about. And I need to tell you a personal story. I accidentally became a lawyer. I fully intended on staying in college as long as possible. I was going to get a PhD in history, preferably in a European university. And my father, having been an academic, suggested that's not a wise course. And since he was paying for law school, I went to law school. He thought it'd be useful to have a backup trade. I didn't take it seriously, So I took great courses like Admiralty, international law, world law, if you can believe that. And I was contemplating, my wife and I were contemplating pursuing my fantasy of going to Europe and studying somewhere. However, this was the fall of 1965, and as I was being sworn into the bar, I stopped by my local draft board and asked them where I stood, and they said, number one. I quickly activated an application to the Air Force to be a judge advocate, and in effect, I was a draftee. Luckily, one of the courses I took in law school was military law. That was another gut seminar. And back in those days, there was no JAG school, no training. You sat as counsel on a couple of guilty plea cases, and then they threw you into the courtroom. And for those who've had military experience, back in those days, special court marshals did not have law officers, what they're calling now judges. The senior member ruled on motions. And in the other branches of the service, lawyers were not even provided in some cases. But I enjoyed it. I discovered you could really help people by being a lawyer. Forgive me, I got bad vocal cords. I defended and, well, I was prosecuting a case and I lost it. That's how I became a defense lawyer. It's sort of, I think that's very typical, and I probably do the same thing if I was a staff judge advocate. I defended courts martial and administrative discharge boards. The administrative discharge boards, I noticed, had this strange notion that if somebody had been acquitted by a court martial, they could still be discharged for what was then called an undesirable discharge. And I stumbled across some federal court case law, filed all this away in my mind, maybe something to do in the future. I was then put in charge of processing all of the administrative discharges. And I just made notes to myself of how many violations could be violated. And that would result in a federal court overturning a court-martial conviction. Well, the point of this story is how a civilian-oriented person became a draftee and really got something out of it. And I say civilian-oriented, that was a phrase my my staff judge advocate made in my exit interview. Why, Captain Addlestone, are you leaving the Air Force? And I told him, I wouldn't lie to him, so I said, I opposed the war in Vietnam. And he said, can I just say Captain Addlestone is civilian-oriented? And I said, certainly. That cost me a commendation medal, but it was worth it. I have probably talked to 10,000 active duty service members and veterans over the course of 50 years. World War I, all the way to today, even a couple of veterans of the Spanish Civil War served in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, which of course they don't get VA benefits. We are facing a continuing war, and the barbarians are not at the gate. They have crossed past the gate. So I think we need to think about who fights and who makes policy. What I say following this is not the position of NVLSP. This is my own personal suggestion. Let's start by remembering George Washington's admonition against a large standing army. And I think he was meant to also say a military class. We've certainly gotten away from that. Some believe, and I don't know whether it's true or not, that we currently have armed forces made up basically of economic draftees. It's been called a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. In any event, the armed forces do not represent our civilian population. This leads to further separation of the poles in this country. To become polarized and have a permanent military class, I question whether this is a good thing. And not that I'm afraid of them, I met people by being a draftee that I never would have associated with. I came from the South, never had the opportunity to have African-American friends, and within 6 months at my Air Force base, we were socializing with African-Americans. The mixture of draftees there was much more reflective of the nature of our society. And we're losing that. If we had a conscription again, people would have the opportunity to meet people they would not meet in their normal daily work, and further leading to polarity in this country. Few families have skins in the game. I mean, I know a couple of families that had people serve in Iraq and Afghanistan, but not many more. Now, is it all volunteer force working? And this is somewhat controversial, but there have been some critics that have questioned it. Let me just give you a few facts. Everybody's familiar with the effects of multiple tours on the soldiers that served in Afghanistan and Iraq. Seemingly much more horrible experience than Vietnam, and leaving a human wreckage that is yet to be dealt with. The resignations and failure to re-enlist by company level officers and NCOs has something to say about what's going on. We have unheard of court-martial firings, demotions, and reprimands of generals and admirals. Never in our history have there been so many. No one has really put a story together about all of them. There have been at least 10 that I'm aware of. This is indicative of something, maybe toxic command. The court-martial rate currently is twice that of Vietnam-era veterans. The less than honorable discharge rate is twice that of Vietnam-era veterans. 22,000 Army veterans of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan have been discharged for misconduct with usually an other than honorable discharge, and have been, same time, been diagnosed with mental health issues. Clearly something's wrong. Who makes the policy? Well, Congress traditionally has had a large number of veterans. Usually, or in this 1970s, it was around 70%. It's less than 20 now. Hill staffers on Capitol Hill, less than 1% served in the military. Out of the 20 or so presidential candidates, assuming Jim Webb's not running, there's one that served in the military, and he was an Air Force judge advocate. It's food for thought. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you to my soulmate of 52 years, Irene.